Hi, and welcome to this edition of Non-Duality with Russ Rapp. I want to have an intro because that's what a lot of YouTubers do. Is they have some sort of intro. Typically, it's something like, "Hey guys," or "Hello, beautiful souls," or something like that. So, if you have any suggestions as to how I can kick off all of these videos, let me know in the comments. And welcome, welcome, Matt Buchanan. I will be going through some of your comments and questions in the chat here shortly. It's been a while since I've made a video, so I'm going to read through some of your comments on some of the videos I've done, or the comments that have come through here in the last few months. But first off, I just want to say, if you haven't subscribed to my channel, odds are if you're watching this live, you probably have already subscribed, but maybe you just happen across it. But I just want to build my subscriptions, hopefully get to 1,000 so I can start doing this live and on my phone here. So then I can do this in other locations, especially as the weather gets a little bit nicer later on. And I also want to say, if you're aware of any other platforms that other speakers use that would maybe be an alternative to YouTube, that would be great. Just let me know that in the comments. But before we get into the live talk here, I guess for those who have just happened to this video or haven't seen any of my videos before, don't really know what I talk about, or maybe someone unfamiliar about non-duality, I want to start off by covering those grounds first, because obviously if you're watching a video about non-duality, that's what you want to hear about. So let's make sure we cover our bases first. So non-duality, what does non-duality mean? Non-duality means not two. It's as simple as that. But if you look at the word itself, it's got you break it up into non-duality. So duality is within the word itself. And so oftentimes people, when they talk about non-duality, they think of it as oneness. And in a certain respect, that is true. In another way, it kind of defeats the purpose of the concept of non-duality as it stands. And the reason why it's called non-duality is because duality is within that non-duality. And so it's not saying that there is no duality, but there is not two. There is non-duality. And the reason why it's geared in that direction is because non-duality is a negation versus an accumulation in a way. That's kind of the one function that it has, if you want to look at it in that sense. And so you kind of get off the path when people talk about there is no person, or this is not real. You're speaking to something that believes that wholeheartedly, like its whole sense of identity is built into this idea of being something, existing, living. And so if you talk in those terms, it's hard for the something to release or let go of what it assumes it is. And so that's why oftentimes people say the opposite of what our everyday assumption is, every moment assumption. And so you say there is no person. Well, I've never considered there is no person. Obviously, there's a person. I'm flesh and blood. I exist. I'm real. This is happening. And so if you speak in those terms, it just reinforces this belief that is inherent in you as a separate self. And so non-duality comes in and says, hey, there's not two. And the result of that is speaking in these kind of paradoxical opposites. And so you talk about the negative, the negation. And so if you look at non-duality as a form of speech, non-duality can be seen as a noun. So what does non-duality mean as a noun? So non-duality is what is. It's this. You can't really describe it because it is everything and nothing at the same time. And so oftentimes speakers of non-duality speak of it in the sense that it's a noun. But what ends up happening is when you say, well, what is non-duality? It is what is. That's not good enough for people. They want more. And so, oftentimes what happens is there's this sense of, okay, well, yeah, what is, but what do I get out of that? And if you're coming to non-duality, you're probably coming to it for a reason. You're trying to find something, you're trying to learn something, you're trying to achieve something, which is totally fine. And I think that's one of the main things to ask yourself is why? Why are you interested in non-duality? Why are you here listening to this in this moment, the moment that doesn't exist? And so as a noun, it kind of leaves people wanting more. And so then what ends up happening, the separate self is the life animation is movement. So what we see as real is movement. If there was no movement, then there wouldn't be life in the sense that we understand it. And so people come to non-duality and want to make a verb, the form of speech of verb. And I always mention Paul Hederman because I enjoy his talks. He talks about verbing, and so we always want to we're always a verbing entity, and we try to make that something by becoming a noun, but reality is a verbing. And so what ends up happening is, since what we are is in motion and movement, we try to find the truth in that movement, in that motion. And so we want to do something with non-duality. We want to apply it in some way. We want to become something. And then it kind of goes down the other path of seeking. And the other part of speech to mention is the adjective. And so since we kind of go down the path of the noun of non-duality and find that it is what it is, and that doesn't tell me anything, or we try to verb, we try to seek, we try to become, and we get frustrated with that, then we look towards the adjective of non-duality, which is, can be described as, eternal love, peace, wisdom, the ultimate truth, whatever you want to call it. Stop selfing. Yeah, we'll get to that. keep adding your chat comments. So we describe it in a certain way, and so when you think of these terms, we use them in the sense that we understand it. So what is eternal love, infinite beingness, or whatever term you want to use? What does that really mean? We take it as our own human understanding and apply it in the way that we come to understand it. And so what ends up happening with that is we define it, we describe it in a way of, in a sense, a positive way, that when you talk about the idea of peace. Okay, so non-duality is equivalent to peace. Well, what does peace mean? So peace is a lack of struggle, lack of turmoil, whatever you want to say. And so what that means is, when we go out to try to find what non-duality means, we search for those that seem to exemplify peace. And so oftentimes you see speakers talk to the camera quietly and have this air of, everything is fine. And I speak slowly because everything is as it is, and that can kind of force people down the guru path of trying to find that one speaker that, has the ultimate truth, and everyone else, isn't quite there yet, hasn't quite found the non-dual awareness that I've been seeking. And oftentimes that goes towards maybe people that are no longer living, because we can build them up and idealize them, make them an idol in our minds to say, this is what a non-dual master or someone who has exemplified non-dual awareness, that is what I'm seeking. That's what I'm looking for. And they are that. So I need to follow to the T what they say. I need to emulate them. I need to live how they lived. Because if you look at current non-dual speakers, me being one of them, oftentimes you see, well, who's this guy or who's this gal? What who are they? Who are they to talk about non-duality? They obviously they're not quite there yet. They're not, they haven't reached the ultimate pinnacle of non-duality, which is silly in a way, but that's what ends up happening. And oftentimes, if you were to meet your guru, let's say Jim Newman, let's say you met Jim Newman, like, wow, he's just nothing, everything just, rolls off, nothing seems to bother him. He just is always just this like centered peacefulness, and he just, everything he says, like, is just coming from this depth of non-dual perfection. And if you're to meet Jim Newman, odds are, if you were to interact with him, you'd be like, who's this guy? Your pedestal that you put Jim Newman on, or Russ Rapp, or Tony Parsons, or anyone that you find to be, um, non-dual certified, certified in something, you'd be disappointed because you would see them as human. And oftentimes when you hear speakers talk in these ways, well, obviously, the self is not there. I am no person, or there is no I, there is no person. The self is not there, but the self in a sense still exists. I'm just not that. I am this nothingness. There is no center. There is no me. And so when outwardly we see them act in a certain way, maybe they act not in a nice way, we would see that as being uh, something we see on a daily basis, and we react to that. But how they would define it is, well, there's still part of Russ Rapp coming through here. There's still Jim Newman, Jim Newming, is that a word? Still verbing, still acting this way, but that's not who I am. And so there's this disconnect, there's this paradox of that. And so in a sense, like, that's why we have to idolize people, because we can't see them as being imperfect, because once they become imperfect, then we get the sense that we did not find what we're looking for. And so there's this constant journey to try to find what truth is. And so that's kind of a quick rundown of non-duality. And so if you think I'm full of crap and you don't think that I know what I'm talking about, stop watching the video and go watch someone else. That's fine. Um, so there's a non-duality. I thought of an analogy last night, in regards to this idea of everyone seems to be light and full of life and that sort of thing when it comes to non-duality. And I think regardless of how people come across, because everyone has good and bad days, there is kind of this sense of the cosmic joke, the idea that, here's the analogy I would use, is, you can picture a dog owner with a ball. And so they're outside playing with the ball. And so, you play catch, you throw the ball, the dog runs and gets it, brings it back, gives you the ball, you throw it again, and it goes on for as long as you want to play the game. But we've all seen it where you hold the ball in your hand and you throw it, and you don't actually throw it, you still got it in your hand. The dog runs, searches, and has this confused look, and it's kind of it's a funny thing, like, silly dog, what are you doing? Trying to find the ball. Let's here, I'll throw it this time. You throw it, and you don't actually throw it. And the dog goes and looks, comes back to you, and like, where's the ball? And then you're like, oh, hey, I got it. And then eventually you throw it back, and then it's part of the game. And how I would describe that is you are both the dog owner and the dog. And as we go through life, we're constantly trying to catch the ball that the owner is throwing, and we're bringing it back. We want to keep playing the game. And the cosmic joke is you throw the ball and there is no ball, but the dog is still going to continue to try to chase it, even if there is no ball out there. And so even if you understand at your core what non-duality is, you're still going to be who you are, and it's still going to manifest as it does one way or the other. And that's the joke, is you'll never get it, and you'll never get it, and you'll still never get that. And that's confusing, but hopefully the analogy helped with that. So first I'll read through your chat comments here. Matt Buchanan says, what do you think about Jim Newman? I like what he says. I feel like I think he says some good things regarding non-duality. I think it's pretty clear in a large sense. I think it's a certain style that him and people like Tony Parsons has, of this kind of disconnected, dry type of pointing, and kind of this direct sense of there is no person, there's no one speaking, and it kind of like you try to come at them with your seeking, and they're like, no. No. That's their style. I think we're all kind of acting in a way, because if you look at the ego, the personality, I think I've mentioned in other videos, I've been learning Spanish with the Duolingo app here for the last 2.5 years, and I want to continue to build on that. But I was learning, they talked about personalities in the last session that I did, and the word in Spanish for personality is caracteres, or character, like character. And so we essentially, in a large way, are characters that we're playing out. And so we always come, well, is this person being genuine? Is this person being authentic? That's another question to ask. So I don't know if Jim Newman is being authentic, if he's subconsciously or consciously playing a role in order to have a reaction from his audience. I think sometimes people emulate those types of leaders in a thought group and say, that's how I want to be. And so people come to non-duality and they see someone like Jim Newman or Tony Parsons. I just keep bringing up those two, but there's many more. But they think that's how I need to live. That's how I need to act. And that's why I like LMA Sophia. She's made a few videos recently, and she used to do a lot more talking about non-duality, but she drinks wine and smokes and stuff when she does it. So I enjoy that, because kind of breaks the conditioning of this is what the guru should look like. This is who I should be. This is how I should act, because that's not what non-duality is about. It's not a religion. Daryl says GM. I'm not sure what that reference is. Namaste. Stop selfing, says Ida Catherine Angel. Love Paul, love all of you talking about the undesirable. The undesirable. Indescribable. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you can't describe it. And that's the great thing. Matt laughed at that. Matt, when you stop identifying with the mind or ego and the I am is nothing, what does one identify with? When you stop identifying with the mind or the ego and the I am is nothing, what does one identify with? So that's a good question. I think a response to that would be, who is the one identifying? I guess that's the question. But if you stop identifying with the mind or the ego, it still is there, if you will. And so I think oftentimes the struggle that we find ourselves in is because we identify with the mind or the ego, and it becomes this kind of crystallized thing that we define ourselves by. But when you release some of that, when you release some of that, how do you describe that? It still happens. Still, things still manifest in your life, but there is this sense that there's no ground to it. There's no solidity. There's no solidness to it. But yet, the same habits, the same characteristics continue to play out, and there is, the flip side of non-duality, meaning you don't have to do anything. There is a process that happens in life that happens. And so non-duality is kind of that basis of freedom, that the idea that the ultimate core of your being is love, essentially, if you want to define it like that, or truth. And so that gives us the ability to release those connections that are not helpful. So it allows things to flow through. When we hold on to our identities, how we see ourselves, and that causes pain in a sense. I mean, the system, the vessel is still there, but everything kind of flows through, and that's part of this sense, this negation, the sense of letting go. Non-duality is the basis of this idea of letting go, of just being, because we try to hold on to all these things. And so without the truth, the absoluteness of non-duality, of God, then this flow would not be possible, if you will. If there is nothing, if there's not nothing, then there is no way to get out of that prison. That doesn't exist. Ida Catherine Angel says, I love her. Yes, I'm assuming you're talking about LMA. Oh, GM, good morning. Good morning, Daryl. Yes, Ella. Ella gets drunk. Daryl says Ella gets drunk while she's on YouTube sometimes. All good. Yeah. So I haven't watched, honestly, I haven't watched a lot of non-duality videos here in the last few months, so I don't exactly know what everyone is talking about. I think it kind of gives, I looked at it as it gave me a basis of what types of things people are looking at, what people are wrestling with when it comes to non-duality. But at the end of the day, I enjoy this topic. It's something that I like talking about. Why? I don't really know. I think I've covered some of that in other videos, but obviously there's everything else to talk about, because we talk about nothing here, but there is not nothing. There is everything and nothing. And so nothing is just a reaction to our belief in everything. If that and that's where, like in A Course in Miracles, they talk about God did not make this world. In a sense, it's talking about Maya, or the illusion of this idea of the world. And part of that is we define it in a certain way based on our perceptions and our belief systems. And so then we see the world not as it is how we believe it to be, which to some extent, perception is reality, but there is an absolute truth behind that reality. So it is how we see it, but it is more than that. And it's kind of like, if you're having a bad day or a good day or however your day is going, you see the world in a certain way, but there's so many other people in the world that are having a completely different experience from a different perspective that doesn't necessarily match yours. And so, we don't necessarily perceive that from a conscious standpoint, but I assure you that's happening in every moment. And so that's where we fail to understand the absoluteness, the objectivity of the existence that we live in. We see it in the way that we do. All right, glad you're back, Russ. Thanks, Daryl. Yeah, it's good to be back. I guess kind of my plan at this point with these videos, I started doing some short 90-second non-duality videos, and I started, I was doing probably more often, and I used to make more like package videos, but for me, I enjoy this. I enjoy the interaction, and when it comes to making a video, it seems like a lot of effort, and I don't have a lot of desire to do that at this point. I have enough videos, I think, that are pretty packaged well enough that if you want to get a tighter version of non-duality, you can find that. But for me, for instance, like I want to talk about the matrix as it relates to non-duality. I've talked a little bit about that in other videos. But I love to do it where I took the time and effort to really kind of lay it all out, almost maybe write it a little bit so I know exactly kind of how I want to describe it versus just kind of off the cuff talking about it and make, even add like, imagery from the movie or the trilogy, especially because they're coming out with a new one. And I just don't have the focus to do that at this point in time. But I know another YouTuber that I like to listen to, and I don't think she's made a video in a while, but Laverin, L''AVERIN. She's brilliant, but no, she makes good videos, but she definitely takes the time to package it together and kind of produce it more. And she's talked about the Matrix in a sense. And so, but at this point, that's not really my focus. So when I do talk more about the Matrix, specifically on one of these live talks, it'll just kind of be off the cuff based on kind of what I've been considering. And I think with the new Matrix movie, just a quick plug to that, is my thought process on it now is the trilogy was set up as a trilogy, body, mind, spirit, however you want to describe it. And I think the fourth movie would probably have to do with the idea of time. And the reason why I say that is because the Wachowski twins, they made Cloud Atlas into a movie, and that is all about jumping through time and everything like that, and kind of this perception of time. And so the Matrix itself, the trilogy, doesn't really get into that idea, but in order to bring back, spoiler alert, if you haven't seen the trilogy, don't listen to this part, mute it for a second, but Trinity dies. But she's in the new movie, and I know Keanu Reeves is in the new movie, and so there has to be this. Oh yeah, and he dies too. Sorry, but there has to be some idea of time in that new movie, and so I'll get into that probably in another video. But the point is, I don't really have the desire at this point in time to make package videos, because the ironic thing is my most focused and video that I put effort into and that I did a bunch of takes and edited it and this sort of thing, and it was stressful making the video. was my very first one, best method to experience non-duality. I think the best method to experience non-duality. It's got the most views at this point in time. Right now, as of this video, it's over 13,000. And I think part of it is just how the YouTube algorithm works, as far as, best method is something that, works pretty well for making videos. And I think that goes a long way to show what are people looking for when they come to non-duality. They're looking for the verb. They're looking for something to do, something to become, something to achieve. And that's a perfect example, because they want to find the best method. And it's a little tongue-in-cheek of a video, because obviously it's a little bit of a clickbait in a sense, because that's what non-duality is in a sense about. That you're coming looking for something and you're going to find nothing, and that's the joke. But people watch it, and I've watched it since then, and I think it's a good video, but like, I just find it fascinating how that's the video that has all these views, and a lot of my other ones don't have as many views. And so that being said, let's go back to your comments here. Going home, how does one disidentify from the content of painful memories? I mean, how does one see that they are not the things they did and said in the past? Ooh, that's a good one. So, disclaimer, I'm not a therapist. I'm not a licensed psychologist or any of that. So, I speak about these things in fun. I can talk about my own experience, and maybe that'll be helpful, maybe it won't. But when it comes to the content of painful memories, trauma, that sort of thing, how does one see that they are not the things they did and said in the past? Well, in truth, because you're not. But you'll never believe that necessarily. And so that's when it kind of gets into the realm of, what do you do with all this? What is the path? And I think the most basic way of saying it is, you are forgiven. And I come from a Christian background. I consider myself a Christian, a follower of Jesus Christ. And I remember when I went to college, I took an alternative medicine class. And I think a lot of people in that genre are maybe more spiritual than religious and that sort of thing. And that's probably how I defined myself at the time. And I remember our instructor saying that she was a Christian. I'm like, well, how can you be into all these like Eastern methodologies and medicine and stuff like that? And like, how can you believe Christianity, or how can you consider yourself Christian when it's a myth, it's a story in a sense? It's because it's all stories. But when it comes to this idea of what do you do with all this, how do you get rid of this pain, there's the sense that you are already forgiven. And so that's the framework that I would describe it as. And the grace that provides is something that can tear down your walls and can release some of that pain, because when you feel like you have to fix it, we have to get rid of it or disidentify from it, it's a way that you push that away and not process through it. And I think eventually I want to talk about the Enneagram a little bit more. I've got the symbol on my phone, but I started reading this back in college. I've mentioned this before, but I had a college professor named Sheila who introduced me to it in one of her class that I took. And it's probably almost been 20 years, but we deal with trauma, we deal with our basic insecurities, our basic fears in a certain way. And that is part of our ego structure. And so, we try to, how do we loosen that up? How do we get out of the story that we tell ourselves, or the story that we the character that we put out into the world, that we exemplify. Because when I first started reading the Enneagram, it was like I thought I was unique and authentic and real, and then I realized that I was just an actor. I was fake. I was playing a role. I was playing a part. And the funny thing was that actually I misidentified myself as a 4, and then come to realize later that I would consider myself a 5 with a 4 wing. Well, but you're a non-dual master. How do you identify with a personality type? Yeah. So 5 with a 4 wing. But it was kind of a slap in the face to say, hey, wake up, you're not who you think you are. And that was a point of loosening some of that structure, that rigidity that I had in my life. But the core of everything is that you are loved and that you are forgiven. And whether you know that or not, makes no difference. We all want to be rid of pain, and that's what our ego and our personality does, is try to deal with that in its own way, which maybe helps, maybe works, because sometimes feeling that pain in a given moment is too much to bear, and that's where we cover it up, or we avoid it, we push it away, we turn it into something else, as a way to not feel that. And in time, it will be as it is. And if you just go with the basis that you are loved, that you're forgiven, that you'll be free from sin through the blessing of Jesus Christ, then that's what you need to know, I guess. That's how I would say that. So thank you, Going Home. That was a really great question. All right. And I hope my volume is good. No one's mentioned anything. So I guess the volume's good, because I've watched other videos, and I think the volume is such a key thing. If I've had people that talk really quiet, and then they talk really loud, and then they talk really quiet, and then they talk really loud, and then when they talk quiet, they kind of mumble it, and that stuff drives me nuts. So hopefully, how's my volume? Does it sound good? All right, so let's go through, and I appreciate you sticking around here listening. Let's go through a few of the comments from the last few months since I've been incognito, and just comment on a few. Let's see. So bear with me here. So this is the moment when I'm not talking, you can just sit in this peaceful, all-encompassing silence. So instead of me staring blankly into the camera, to give you that sense, you can just watch me look through my phone real quick. So bear with me. All right. So Blue Eyes says, it is fair to say that when the self is fully absent, the non-dual state is fully present. We all experience the selfless state when we lose ourselves in an activity we really love. Artists, musicians, athletes, etc. are aware of this in the zone state. It is when they perform best and when genius appears. The next time you are engrossed in a book, lose yourself while listening to music or while dancing, etc., know it to be a state where the self is not. It is an introduction into non-duality, a taste of freedom, if you like. The difference between someone like the Buddha or Ramana Maharshi, people that are dead, that I added that part, is they sustain this condition throughout every activity at all times in all places. So there's more to it, but I just want to read that part. So I think there's a sense that I am false because I want to be this non-dual awareness, this thing that I define myself or define the world to be. And when I fall short of that, then I feel this pain essentially. And so when I'm not the perfection that I think I should be, then all this struggle and strife occurs. And so I think there is something to this idea of being in the zone, because creativity comes from nothing. It is this flow of nothing into something. So I think that is a reflection of what non-duality is trying to say. But what ends up happening is the separate self, the one that you define as you or me as Russ Rapp, hears that and makes that something that they need to achieve. So I need to be in this zone at all times. When I'm not in the zone, I'm a horrible person, and that's a lie. Don't think elephant. Don't think an elephant. And then Steve said, so you didn't give any method. So my best method, yeah, he caught it. He figured that one out. A fish can. Creative Zebra says a fish cannot experience water without knowing life on land. We cannot experience non-duality. We can only see and experience duality. Stop thinking to be in non-duality. Exactly. So that's the other thing when it comes to non-duality. Some of the best speakers point to duality, point to the lie, point to the illusion, and they say, hey, this is your thought process, this is what you believe, and they point to it and make that something manifest that you can objectify and say, oh, before I was identifying with that idea, that belief, that concept, that way of living. And when I point to it and say, hey, that's an object. So when I read the Enneagram, I identified with that character, that character. But when I saw it as a story, I saw it as an object. I saw it as not me. And so that's where some of the great speakers talk about this idea of non-duality and point to the duality in order to wake people up to the fact that they're believing something that isn't true. Stories is another way of getting this idea across to something we can relate to, because we all as humans communicate through stories. And so the better storytellers, which I'm not one of them, and I think in analogies, but a story goes a longer way to illustrating the concept that we're trying to discuss. Well, that's a long one. Okay, so let's see. Why have you been incognito? I guess my focus was elsewhere for a few months. I'll leave it at that for now. This belief, okay, so Alec Damianoff, I probably butchered that. This belief is so close yet so far. So he watched my experience non-duality video, or best method. We are all one. We are all part of the same global consciousness. I am talking about us. Me, the person in control of my body. The problem with this theory is that you can never find proof. However, once you get in tune with your soul, your intuition, that's when the true inner peace is achieved. Until then, you are just trying to use logic to make sense of something that you can never intellectually understand, until you awaken to your true life's purpose and experience the amazing world we live in. I feel a bit sad for everyone who finds comfort in the idea that they do not exist. I cannot blame you, though. I was right there myself until one day I found the undeniable truth that we are all just spiritual beings having a human experience. Yep. So I think me being a thinking type of a person, I do talk about it, and that's how we communicate non-duality through a conceptual basis. So Alec is right on when he says that. I guess I don't necessarily, I don't know what I said in that video necessarily, but um, I think I wouldn't define it that saying that we do not exist. We exist and don't exist, but that's yet another paradox. But I think the funny part is, Alex says, I was right there until I was anointed. Till I became the initiated into the hidden mystical truth of that we are spiritual beings having a human experience. And the reason I think that's funny is because that line is kind of, I would say, kind of a cliche at this point in time, because it's been used a lot as far as spiritual beings having a human experience, which I think is true to a large sense. But what is a soul? What does that even mean? And then you become conceptual again. So it's kind of a catch-22. Okay, so Alex said, if you're viewing it this is from the Real Deal and Non-Duality, which I really enjoyed making that video. If you're viewing it this way, I don't think you've gotten it yet. When you've got it, it will be unmistakable. Good luck, brother. Well, good luck to you, Alex. I appreciate you saying that I don't got it, because you're totally right on that. How can there be non-duality if there isn't duality? Yes, that's true. Let's see. Oh, Daryl says, okay. So, I like to keep a little mystery, Daryl, just to make you wonder, keep this, if you look at another thing that I want to mention, something that you can actually maybe gain from this video, since non-duality doesn't give you anything, is there's a book called How the World Sees You, I think. Sally Hogshead is the author, and her kind of theory system is called the your fascination advantage, I think it's called. But How the World Sees You, I think, is the book. And I identify with the mystique category of that. It breaks it down kind of sort of like the Enneagram, and as far as that goes, or Myers-Briggs. But it's an interesting way of looking at it, because we're always looking, if we're trying to seek who we are, we're always looking internally. But I think it's good to turn the mirror out and to say, how does the world see me? Because that can offer some sort of guidance as to the illusionary self that you believe yourself to be, and how you can take advantage of your personality, in a sense. Because often, I'll just say this quick, often what you see as a weakness, something you're trying to get rid of in yourself, is a strength, but you see it in the negative sense. And just a quick example of that, I was running on the treadmill this week, and I didn't go about it in this sense, but in a way it was kind of a meditation. But I'm not a huge fan of running, especially on a treadmill, but I can be very persistent in my personality. And so what I did was I basically counted every second. So it has the clock on there. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, all the way up to a minute. I'd call out the minute. And then in my head, I would call 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, all the way up to 60 seconds. So I did that for basically 30 minutes. And it made the time go really fast, because it broke up that chunk of time into 30 segments, which seemed something I could wrap my head around, versus 30 times 60, which would be 100 or 1800 seconds. Yes. So that it broke it up, so it made the time, it was kind of a play of time, but it was my way of using my focus that I can do, and using it to benefit myself, versus using it in a negative sense through anxiety. Mystique, though. So find out for yourself how the world sees you. Okay, so real quick, read a couple more from online. Let me read this real quick. Mark Foreman says, "You can't experience non-duality. You can only be non-duality. To experience anything is to be in duality. Experience means practical contact with and observation of facts or events. To observe requires the observer and the thing being observed, which is itself duality. So if you are observing yourself, that is again duality." And so that was a response to my best method video, and that's totally true. Maybe you didn't get the joke, but that's great. But maybe you just read the title and said, hey, this person's wrong, which is great. I was thinking, okay, so Nathan Daniel Vargas Yag. I was thinking about how we can understand. Oh, so this, I don't know, okay, maybe not enough backstory, but I had a video called Non-Duality, how about non-triality? The world is built mathematically into in different ways, whether it's hexagonal or trinity, if you will. So that's kind of what the video is about, because dualistic is the simplest way of seeing self and other, but we also break up reality in other geometric, sacred geometry, if you will. But Nathan says, I was thinking about how we can understand white only because we can see red, green, and blue, or how we can understand space only because we can experience XYZ, like on a graph, if you will. I think good and bad is just part of the whole because that's all we can grasp for now. Just like we can't experience the four-dimensional aspect of the universe or color, white plus infrared, since we can't see infrared. So that gets a lot of technical kind of stuff. I think whether it's scientifically or from a moral standpoint, I think non-duality isn't giving you anything, so it's not telling you what to believe, and so it doesn't necessarily negate or bolster your current belief system or a moral code or conceptual basis. And so if you're using that to build your own belief system, then I'd question whether that's true. Non-dual awareness trap, awakening thrushrooms says, I think the biggest non-dual trap is failing to recognize that you are an extension of God's oneness as it is expressed in the relative physical world. It is important to develop the self and let that be integrated into your oneness self also. Of course, non-duality will attack that as a divergent idea from non-duality reality, the ultimate state where one should be focusing their attention, hence the trap. Non-duality doesn't recognize a God creator as a source. It's complicated. Yes, it's complicated. I don't necessarily agree that it doesn't recognize God as a source, kind of all of definitions, but there's a limitation to how we can understand reality. And so I have no idea. Hi, Russ from Rick. You literally told the Buddhism concept of relative truth versus absolute truth in my Lies About Non-Duality video. Sure, I don't know that much about Buddhism, but I guess it kind of gives me some credibility. We're almost through. Read a couple more here. So best method to experience non-duality. Andrew Strever says, terrible first line, I'm selling. So I'm glad I got to that one, because part of my process when I first started making videos was, a lot of the non-dual speakers I saw were doing kind of similar to what I'm doing now, where it was just a free flow of thought. There wasn't a lot of packaging to it, or not a lot of production. Even the video quality may not be very good. And so I wanted to do the opposite, because non-duality is about paradox and opposites in order to get people to see another perspective. And so I wanted to make it more packaged, if you will, as much as I could within the means that I have. And so terrible first line, I'm selling, in quotes, that was the angle I wanted to take. I wanted to make it like a typical, hey guys, this is the new video on how to, plant a garden. In this video, I'm going to show you. So that was kind of the, as you can see what I'm doing there, that was kind of the genesis of some of it. I think as we go through, a non-duality gains in somewhat popularity, I think there's going to be more packaging anyway, and that can have the reverse effect. But for me, I'm just trying to be genuine in the sense that I'd rather just talk in a free sense on these live videos because I enjoy it more. Maybe someday I'll package some videos again, but so maybe the question should be, was I ever there? From Mirror Image. Ista Oscar Masi. I butchered that one, I'm sure. Thus goes the mind of the divine. A character called Russ has once again appeared in God's dream. So that was my I'm back video. All right, so got caught up from the last few months on some of your comments. I think Matt has said a couple things here. Matt Buchanan, what do you think about Eckhart Tolle? So the power of now, Eckhart Tolle. I think it's great. I think what he says is true. I think, trying to be in the moment, trying to focus, kind of the mindfulness sort of idea, can be beneficial. It kind of goes back to my original thing at the beginning of this video, that he becomes the basis of how I want to live my life. So he has a story where he was a homeless person basically on a bench and whatever, and then he had this like realization, he had this awakening, and now he's just like, everything's great and hunky-dory, and he just has this deep connection with reality, with what is, with the present moment, and he's has this air about him. He's been on Oprah, so obviously that's legitimate eye roll. But I think how he can come across is, that's how I would picture someone like that to be. It's kind of like I want to talk to the guy on the hill in the robes. I want to ask him for spiritual advice, because that's how I perceive someone with wisdom and spirituality to be. So I think part of it is he comes across it in a certain way. And so, a lot of that can go towards people hearing what he says, but then trying to emulate, and not realizing the fact that he's not saying necessarily like, this is who I am. He's trying to, like myself, express how he perceives in a way that can be helpful, essentially. But at the same time, he can be like he can be like the carbon copy that we want to follow. And so I want to be the homeless guy on the bench that has this awakening, and now nothing bothers me, everything's fine, everyone take care of my needs, because I don't do anything, so someone else has to set all these talks up, because if I do something, then it shows that I care about something, and I don't care because everything's fine. But I think I like his stuff. His how I got into non-duality, being present 16 hours a day to break compulsive thinking. Oh, yeah, I mean, like I said before, when you talk about methods, when you talk about, this is how you can talk about your experience and your story, and that can be beneficial for people, but that can also be something that they try to emulate and try to be themselves. And your story may not be the same as my story. It's still just a story. And so I think there's, just like anything, it's like if I was giving you advice on, here's how you can eat healthy, or here's how you can work out, or here is, how to shoot a basketball, or whatever I'm trying to explain to you. There's probably better ways of doing it. There's probably good practice, or how to meditate. What kind of meditation should you do? There's advice all over the place. That's what YouTube is filled with, all this advice of how to learn something, how to do something, and that's a big part of what this platform is. And so when it comes to Eckhart Tolle, you know, he gives his advice and it could be helpful, and it just like with anything, but it has nothing to do necessarily about who you are, because whether you're in the present moment or not is not of any significance. There is no good and bad. Everything is perfect the way it is, or it wouldn't be happening, says Matt. I think that's what Eckhart Tolle talks about. I think in a sense that's true, but like I said before, it doesn't, what ends up happening is the postmodern belief of relativism or deconstruction is that you take the idea of non-duality and basically destroy all of the previous conventional wisdom, because there's this new convention that there is no truth and everything is relative. There is no absolute. And so it basically tears down our moral code, our what it is to be human, how we treat each other. And so it can be used to tear down systems that are beneficial to human beings. And so the idea that there is no good and bad can be taken in a literal, solid sense, where people lose their moral compass and just do what thou wilt. And I wouldn't recommend that. Matt says, laughing has been an Oprah, but you're right. I'm not a huge fan of Oprah, if you haven't noticed. That's his story, and I understand it now. I enjoy chatting with you. Me too, Matt. All right, so we're up to a little over an hour. I should probably wrap this up here. So it's been really enjoyable, and I just want to say thank you for all of your participation. Thank you to everyone who commented on my videos the last few months. And if you know, there's nothing wrong with a non-dual master, tongue-in-cheek, asking you to subscribe. I'm assuming if you've made it this far, you've either subscribed or you definitely consider subscribing. So yeah, and I enjoy your comments, so continue commenting. And like I said, I will probably be doing a live talk on the weekends here at this point, like once a week. So look forward to that. Ida, bless you. And I just want to say you are forgiven, you are loved, and take on the rest of your day in that knowledge, the knowledge of what is. Peace.